welcome to Masters of Divinity. I am your moderator, JP, and I'm here with Father Chuck.
I feel like for this episode, we should have like...
I should have wrapped it or something? Like
No, like different names. Like, what would... Like, I told you that, like, if I had a hip-hop name for years, I said my hip-hop name would be Cumberbund.
Cumberbund. Why is it Cumberbund? What
I don't know. It's funny. It's a funny word.
Yeah, I don't know.
Don't just see. I also for a while I joked in high school that like my rap name would be Vitamin C, and then there was an actual Vitamin C that did that, you know, that graduation song. And so yeah, so I had to. That's right, she's in there. So I had to figure out a different name, and so Keelan and I did a little bit for a while where we called ourselves Cumberbund and the Illumatic.
Okay.
And he was the Illumatic, and I was Cumberbund, and our joke was we had a rap song, not really a rap song. Did we never do this for you?
No.
Where Keelan and I did our song. It's like we ride skateboards. That's how we get around. We never did that.
Oh, yeah. I think we did do that.
Okay,
but that was a long time ago. That was early in our friendship. Those were the early years. Those were.
Oh yeah. Well, and that was so. The joke initially was that our friend Kurt would wear a Boba Fett helmet and play the bongos for our beat, and then we would just say like we would posture like rap artists, but then just do like I ride skateboards. and the thing is when we went around campus once to try to promote Pedro Bustamante's appearance at the first Battle of the Bands that we played at.
Yeah.
And a few of our friends were like, well, what's your band sound like? And we were like, oh, it's just like this. And we went into Cumberbund and the Illumatic.
And the group that we're talking about today are the Beastie Boys. And Chuck has selected an album for this year's Music Mayhem. Hello.
By the way, our first episode of Music Mayhem, third iteration of Music Mayhem.
Yes. Wait, what?
I'm just pointing out that we just really hadn't made much out of the fact that we're doing Music Mayhem again. It was just sort of like
it kind of snuck up on us.
Right. Well, it feels a little bit like maybe we're taking a '90s vibe with it. It's subdued. We're not going to make a big deal out of it. We're just gonna. It's like 1993, like the 1993 coffee house version of Music Mayhem.
It's like MTV's Unplugged to Music Mayhem version, right?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
And that in honor of Matt, because Matt likes the acoustic version of everything.
Yeah. Oh, pouring out for Matt for not being here. I really wanted to hear him talk about the Beastie Boys.
Yes, because apparently he hated this album. And
that would have been. Yeah, I just want to know like what his favorite tracks were, like what tracks he wants to listen to. I'd be like, I don't have any, man. I don't know. Okay, so the group comprised of Michael Diamond, aka Mike D, Adam Yauch. Is that how you pronounce his name?
I think so. Yeah.
Adam Yauch, aka MCA, and Adam Horovitz, aka Adrock. My favorite. Personally.
Mm-hmm. And we should make mention that that Adam Yauch has left this mortal coil back in 2015.
2012 is when he passed away.
Was it really that long ago? I thought it was only 2015. Wow.
5 years. Yeah, 5 years.
Wow.
Yeah, the group has since disbanded. But let's start at the beginning. They started off as a hardcore punk band in 1979 and were called the Young Aborigines. A bit problematic, but okay, it's okay. It was in 1983, however, when they found local success after releasing an experimental hip-hop single called Cookie Puss. And that's when they transitioned into hip-hop. They toured with Madonna in 1985 and later released their debut album, Licensed to Ill, which became the first rap record to top the Billboard charts.
Really quick, can we just acknowledge what that must have been like?
Yeah.
So there's a really well-known story in rock history. The Monkees, right? Where, you know, the Monkees. They were touring and someone decided that Jimi Hendrix should be their opening act. And so there's this great story of like, you know, teenage girls, like their parents ushering them out of the theater because they were understanding why the black man was having sex with his guitar on stage. So I would love to have been part of that, like seen that mall crowd that showed up to hear Madonna and to be subjected to, I did it like this, I did it like that, I did it with a wiffle ball bat. So
yeah, I mean, because you have to understand, like, that is early Madonna. That is like celebrate Madonna. Like,
yeah.
Yeah, not crazy experimental out there Madonna.
She heard our records and she said, I want the Beastie Boys to come on tour with
She loves me.
Sure, Madonna liked the Beasties, but they didn't exactly connect with her crowd.
Come on, get out. No, it's all right. Come on.
Oh my God.
Wait,
oh, this is too much.
No,
kids.
go ahead.
Come on, cut this off.
Like it or not, these guys were taking the stage.
Right. This is Madonna, who's, I mean, she was already kind of offending people a little bit, but she was definitely like a mall crowd. Like, I think even doing like mall concerts at the time.
Really? Like Tiffany? Like
maybe. But but she was, you know, that's, I mean, like I said, she was, you know, she was like, you know, like a Britney Spears kind of figure for her time. She was a, you know, she was a pop figure, and to have this really obnoxious group of guys doing intentionally obnoxious rap.
Detroit, they threw cans and stuff at us.
Yeah.
San Francisco, they hit me in the head with a balled up sweatshirt. It was like a love-hate relationship type thing. You know, we hated them, they hated us. It was like love.
This is so funny. You know what's funny? When I read that she had their first thing, the first like big thing they did was tour with Madonna. It just like, it made sense. Like Madonna would do that. Like, especially 1980s Madonna. Like,
well, I mean, she's a New York person in their New York group, and I could see that. But
kind of a punk rock thing for her to do, to kind of let them, you know, tag along on one of her tours, you know.
Yeah.
But
I just want to say, people must have been so confused.
Yeah. Definitely. Okay, so moving along. The Beastie Boys have sold 26 million records in the United States and 50 million worldwide, making them the biggest selling rap group since Billboard began recording sales in 1991. 7 of those albums, by the way, went platinum, including Hello Nasty. Hello Nasty is considered their most successful album, earning them a Grammy for Best Rap Performance for Intergalactic and Best Alternative Music Album. So that's all the background that I was going to give.
Okay. So I think an important thing to talk about when we talk about the Beastie Boys is you mentioned the fact that they started out as a punk band, and they maintained that ethos throughout their whole career. And I think that's one of the things that attracted me to them when I first discovered the Beastie Boys, is that even though they did rap, I think you could look at them and realize, no, they were punk all the way through. Like they definitely had punk sensibilities, even though they were not doing the punk musical genre. What's probably helpful to know is, I don't know, do you know the history of hip hop, JP?
Not really.
Okay, so hip hop began as a result of block parties in Harlem. It was born in New York. And what would happen is people would have like weekend barbecues, you know, block party barbecues, and they would have people would pull out their turntables and just play records. Well, there began this tradition of guys they called MCs, that basically the DJ who was host. I mean, you think about like a wedding DJ or whatever, same kind of concept, just playing music and talking while they're playing the music. Well, the MCs began to have this tradition of rapping, of, you know, giving this like poetic verse over the music, and then occasionally would mess with the turntable, you know, scratch, do those kinds of things. And that began the early days of what we would call hip hop. What really caused it to explode was the same year as the Summer of Sam murders, when New York City had its infamous blackout. A number of people broke into electronic stores and carted off DJ equipment, and suddenly there was this massive influx of DJs throughout Harlem and other parts of throughout the different boroughs in New York City. And that is seen as the moment of when hip hop really became a thing, because it added this sort of criminal element to it, right? But also people began to experiment with their equipment and what they were doing. You were going to say something.
Yeah, wasn't it also like the government has sort of started cut funding to public schools more and more, especially in New York, because it was such a horrible time for New York.
Yeah,
and you're cutting funding to public schools, which means all the music classes and stuff are getting cut, and they don't have money for instruments, so like they kind of had to improvise with what they had.
Right, people are improvising, and this is the era when like graffiti art is starting to begin, like starting to take to start showing up in New York City, and people are tagging subway cars. I mean, if any of our listeners, viewers, want to know just how grungy New York was in this time period, watch a movie like Taxi Driver, or even Saturday Night Fever.
No, I'm serious. Escape from New York. John Carpenter has said there are places where we just didn't do any set design. Like we just like
Nice.
walk around and like it looked post-apocalyptic.
Oh, rock on! I didn't know that.
The Warriors.
Oh yeah, Warriors. But I'm thinking but like also you've got I think of one of my favorite shots in any movie is the scene toward the end of Saturday Night Fever where John Travolta's character is on the subway train listening to and it's playing Bee Gees' How Deep Is Your Love, and like great use of fluorescent lighting in that shot. But one of the things I noticed in my more recent viewing of that movie is how much graffiti is in that subway car and how gross that subway car is. Yeah. And so that kind of griminess gave birth to this music tradition. And around that time, you've also got punk as a musical genre happening in other parts of New York. So there's just this gritty, grungy, do-it-yourself kind of ethos happening within Black communities and then the white communities in New York City. And so into this world, of course, are the Beastie Boys. I mean, they grow up in New York City. They're from Brooklyn, and they sort of embody this very like street punk, obnoxious kind of thing. And as you mentioned, they start rapping, but they rap at their punk shows as kind of a joke. But then it takes off. And that's when they shift their direction as musicians. They move away from punk and become rap artists. And that's when they attract the attention of Rick Rubin. Rick Rubin was a punk music producer, but he started becoming interested in hip hop at the same time. And so he winds up signing them and getting them involved. What's interesting to me about this time period is, and just in terms of the culture, music culture and street and urban culture, is that, punk and rap have a similar kind of like foundation. They have some similar, American punk and hip hop have this, again, do it yourself, right, counterculture happening on a very small scale. People, not necessarily classically trained musically and sort of coming up with things on their own, and then twisting what's already common in the musical landscape. And I find this fascinating because there has been for a long time a tension between punk and rap. There's been this, and honestly, it is an unchecked racism within the punk culture, I think, in response to all of that. I started to notice a blending of the two when I became a skateboarder in the late 90s. And I started watching lots of skate videos from like Alien Workshop, DC Shoes, and all of that. And I started to notice that, I came to skateboarding sort of by way of the punk rock of punk rock stuff. But I started noticing in skate videos and things that there would be a mix of like punk rock, sometimes heavy metal, and also hip hop over people's things. And so this blurring of genres, which is just kind of a fascinating thing to me. Anyway, so the Beastie Boys, of course, they tap into this. And I think one of the things why I find them so appealing and why I was drawn to them is because it's a similar trajectory for me, is that I was into punk rock as a kid. And then, to me, it's no surprise that because they're the first real rap group I ever listened to, right, is Beastie Boys. I could go on, but I'm going to.
Okay. Well, no, that's a great history lesson. That's a good context to the band that we've chosen and stuff.
Well, and one of the reasons let me just say, one of the reasons I mentioned this is because when we get into it a little bit more and we're talking about the album, it's helpful I think it's helpful for people who don't know hip hop to understand the musical conventions of hip hop and what's going on with hip hop, because basically using other people's music is part of the musical convention. And one of the things about Hello Nasty that I find very fascinating, and the thing that I've been thinking about a lot in listening to it this time around, is the way that samples and other things are used the same way that like a guitarist will use riffs and licks from different artists to incorporate things. They're doing the same thing musically, but they're using pre-recorded versions of it rather than taking it off of like the page musically and borrowing from it. And that goes back to those early days where hip hop was basically, you know, a DJ act of somebody rapping over an already recorded song that they're just playing on the record.
Right.
And so this becomes the eventual, like this kind of rap that we hear the Beastie Boys doing, which is very much entrenched in the New York rap scene, even today, is still carries that through line of utilizing samples from and musical and music from other artists to create this new thing. And it comes to a really interesting place with Hello Nasty, and especially with one of the people that's worth talking about, and we'll get to him, is with Mixmaster Mike, their DJ.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, so let's really get into it. Let me ask you, Chuck. This is sort of part of Music Mayhem tradition.
Yeah.
I ask the person who selected the album, why did you select this album, and what is your personal relationship with this album?
Well, I selected this album. This year's Music Mayhem was very tough for me. Since the last one, I spent the entire year sort of listening to different records and figuring out which one I wanted to. And I've been going through like round and round with a few of them.
You and me both, man. I don't know what it is about this year, but I just been like listening to like just every time you hear something, I was like, I gotta keep that in mind for Music Mayhem. Put a pin in that. Like,
yeah. Well, part of me was wanting to shake up our musical genre, because we've tended to listen to almost exclusively white rock groups.
Yeah.
For Music Mayhem, and one Broadway play that was hip hop based. And so I really wanted to put some attention to around shaking up the genre that we talk about, but also, you know, finding if there's, you know, some other perspectives and voices to talk about in terms of what we're doing. And I was really close to having us talk about The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, mostly because, well, it was an album that I kind of hated when I was a kid, but I never really gave it a shot. And then I listened to it and I love it. And I love doo-wop. And I think but I realized I don't know how comfortable I was with three white guys talking about an album that's very, very much entrenched in the experience of Black women in the late 90s. So I figured if we were going to talk about that, we would have to bring another voice in.
Okay.
That was just sort of my feelings on it. But also anyway, that was that. So I picked, as I was listening to things, of course, in a way, I was very aware of the irony of the first rap album that we talk about being a rap album produced by three white guys.
Yeah.
And that was actually one of the reasons why I was avoiding talking about this album. Cause this was one of my picks fairly early on. But the more and more I listened to a few things and listened to it, I realized it's like, you know, the Beastie Boys, it seems like it's a musical group that seems well within our wheelhouse and what we're doing. Like I said, I thought that you were a bigger fan of the Beastie Boys, and it turns out you are. And so I thought, but it just seemed like inevitable. Like, why, you know, sort of Thanos, they're inevitable. Why are we not talking about the Beastie Boys? And so it just seemed, if there's a Beastie Boys album for us to talk about, that's going to be nerdy, that's going to be like all the stuff that sort of fits within our stylistic and culture and pop cultural wheelhouse, it seemed Hello Nasty is the album to talk about. And so that's why we're talking about it.
Okay.
Go ahead.
I was going to ask you what your personal relationship is with the album. Like,
So my personal relationship with the album is it's the first Beastie Boys album I ever listened to. I had a friend in high school named Eric who was a Beastie Boys fan, and he used to like randomly sing Paul Revere off of License to Ill and Brass Monkey. And so like I was exposed to those songs just because of him referencing them and singing them and just being obnoxious about it. And I think a couple of times he played it for me in my car or something. But I never really thought much about it. And then I remember it was like EGM. It was either Electronic Gaming Monthly magazine. I was really hardcore video gamer at the time in the late 90s. Either that or Tips and Tricks magazine. I can't remember which one it was, but probably might have been Tips and Tricks, which is a magazine I thought was hilarious. And my friend Josh and I used to read this a lot. They were like super excited about a new Beastie Boys album coming out. And I was like, oh, that's interesting. Like, and I was again, being a video game person, there was sort of this like, oh, other gamers are into this. I should pay attention to it. And it was around that time that the Intergalactic video premiered on MTV. And considering that it's rooted in Japanese giant monster, kaiju cinema.
Yeah. This is definitely like a Chuck music video.
Totally. And including to the extent that one of the three Beastie Boys are dressed as like scientists inside this giant like atomic age, cardboard box robot. One of them is dressed exactly like Dr. Mifune from Godzilla versus from the Terror of Mechagodzilla, which is one of my favorite Showa series Godzilla movies. And so when I saw this and I watched this, I was like, okay, these guys are clearly on a similar wavelength to me. There's like, and so I went and bought the album as soon as I could, and it was among the first non-Christian CDs that I bought.
Awesome.
Because that was part of my life. We've talked about that on this podcast a few times, and so. I listened to it and loved it. And my friend Josh, my friend Eric, they could all tell you that for a solid like 2-year, if not 3-year period, every time they got in my car, some form of Beastie Boys was playing in my CD player. But we all loved this album and loved the videos because every video was great. Spike Jonze is responsible for all the great Beastie Boys videos. And there's just this quirkiness to them. And I think, this was around the time where, going back to when I talked about the history of hip hop, this is around the time that a lot of that gritty urban art starts getting sort of legitimated and becomes like considered as like classy high art. Graffiti art is seen as like a legitimate art form, and skateboarding suddenly enters into like the New York urban artsy scene, and so like the Beastie Boys are also kind of getting like this album this sounds like an artwork. It sounds like art. It doesn't sound like, punk kids making, goofing off and making music just for the fun of it. This sounds like they're actually making an artistic statement. And so that was something that attracted me to it as well. And I've since realized that my appreciation of musical genres like jazz and other things largely come out of this album because they incorporate so many different genres. And it was also around this time that I started listening to electronica. And I think that my interest in electronica came out of this album as well. So this record really broadened my musical horizons. And that's my biggest personal takeaway with it.
It kind of feels ahead of its time in that sense, doesn't it? With how open it is with, I'll get into this a little bit later, but I will say that there are some elements to it that was pretty common, I think, throughout the landscape of music at that time, pop music at the time, as we were kind of entering the new millennium. A lot of sampling, a lot of body movement features, a lot of at least the music video version has it's accompanied by Fatboy Slim.
Yeah, well, there's the Fatboy Slim remixed it, right? And that's the version that most people know.
Yeah, and Fatboy Slim is sort of responsible for a lot of sounds that were kind of transitioning to the millennium too, and so for them to be caught up in that sort of in that whirlpool that was happening at the time is pretty cool.
And I will say what's interesting to me is because I remember in 1998 is when we just before then we a rap producer by the name of Sean Puff Daddy Combs came on the scene as a musician in his own right in memorializing his friend the Notorious B.I.G. in a song "I'll Be Missing You," which a lot of people criticize because he just straight up steals Every Breath You Take from the Police and just raps over top of it. And it still stands as, P. Diddy, as he kind of goes by now, his musical career is largely built on just straight up stealing other people's songs and just rapping over top of their, it's not a sample. It's like a remix or a cover almost. And there's a whole genre of hip hop that did that. And I remember when I was a teenager, being really irritated by that.
Biggie did that a lot too. He did that.
Yeah, that's true. Biggie did that too. And again, they were New York rappers. But I just remember, being really annoyed by that. It's there's no originality in this. There's no, how is that you know, and, you know, Sting played nice because I think it was at the Grammys or whatever that year that Sting came on stage and played Every Breath You Take.
Right. Yeah.
While Puffy rapped over top of it. And you know, the same year that this album came out, we got Sony's Godzilla movie, which was awful, but the soundtrack was incredible. And we got Puff Daddy's
Come With Me,
which is, you know, takes Kashmir. And I mentioned these two things because it irritated me listening to some of this music, though I love that. I love Come With Me. That song's badass. But it would irritate me a little bit to think like there's no originality here. Like you're just, you know, whatever. But the Beastie Boys but I was listening to the Beastie Boys at the same time. Yeah. And they're clearly sampling and doing all that. But I just never noticed it because one, the samples are really obscure. But the other is that they layer it under some other sounds that you just don't immediately notice it. And of course, now I'm less irritated by what Puff Daddy was doing. I was just an obnoxious teenager at the time.
Well, I mean, Puff Daddy was like, I mean, he lit a lot of the sort of very kind of the musical cues and stuff that we were already kind of familiar with. He let them do a lot of heavy lifting in his songs. Yeah. So I think that's kind of a key difference. Right.
And I'll also note that at the time I didn't listen to rap. I thought rap was obnoxious. I didn't necessarily, I said a lot of ignorant things about rap when I was a kid.
Yeah.
And I, you know, but of course, you know, the kind of rap that I was exposed to was whatever was on MTV. And it was at that time, the really, really ostentatious gangster rap that was, you know, could be very misogynistic and, you know, very violent at times. And so like, it just never felt like it was my music. Whenever it would come, whenever it was on TV, I just never got the appeal to it. And I just never felt that it had any kind of artistry to it. And again, I think it was because I didn't understand it. And two, I was exposed to very mainstream stuff. Not, you know, I didn't know about like A Tribe Called Quest or The Roots or De La Soul or any of those acts, which the Beastie Boys is sort of in their wheelhouse of that style of music. And so when I encountered the Beastie Boys, the sound, they bridged the sound because it had almost, you know, it was adjacent to like alternative rock. And then also to, as you mentioned, you know, Fatboy Slim and some of those types of electronic acts. Yeah. But there was also a social consciousness to it.
Yeah, which I think is really interesting.
Yeah,
social consciousness and a lot of kind of spiritual openness as well. Just that was
because that part of that is due to the fact that MCA is a Buddhist and incorporates a lot of that stuff in his music.
Which is funny because you know Madonna was going through the same thing at around the same time, right? When she made her big comeback with Ray of Light, it was all of a sudden very electronic and also spiritual and socially conscious. So it's interesting. Yeah. So let me give you some of my initial thoughts on this album, Chuck. This is also a part of tradition. We go with initial thoughts on the album itself.
Yes.
I think what's interesting about it and makes it stand out amongst the most most things related to Beastie Boys is that it's both irreverent, which is sort of their trademark, right? To be kind of irreverent, sort of like a bit of a kind of like, you know, License to Ill is sort of notorious for being like frat house rock, right? Like a frat house kind of, you know, douchey album. And they kind of spend like most of their career trying to like distancing themselves from that.
Well, and let me just say that I'm glad you brought this up because Beastie Boys to this day still have a rep because I mean, License to Ill was enormous when it came out. And it gave the Beastie Boys this reputation. Particularly Fight for Your Right to Party is the song that gives them their reputation. And what they have said in interviews was that it's basically like that song was a satire making fun of like the frat rock thing. They never intended for it to become an anthem, but they basically said it's like a joke that no one got. And so, yeah, they've tried to distance themselves from it. One of the songs that's not on this album, it might be, if not, it's one of my favorite Beastie Boys songs, and that's Alive. It's a single off of their anthology that came out a year later. And so recorded around this time. It has a line in it that sort of acknowledges the homophobia and misogyny that sort of was fostered out of License to Ill. Yeah. But yeah, go on.
Well, what I think is interesting, they spend so much time trying to distance themselves from that, but at the same time also kind of embracing the irreverent nature of that was
right.
Still. So like there's still like, you know, you listen to Intergalactic, you can still hear that, you know, you got a 5 Year Erector Party vibe going.
Yeah.
Well,
so, but I will say, just to interject really quick. One of the things I appreciate about them is that they show that making art can be fun.
Oh yeah.
It doesn't have to, like, you can be arty and fun. It doesn't have to be, you know, super serious artsy and like, you know, snobby and all of that. And then, or, you know, completely mainstream and shallow. Like you can do something really dense like this album, but have fun while doing it.
Right. And you know, if I could like describe this album, it would be irreverent, but experimental and like mind expanding. It's politically and socially conscious and spiritual. Like it really is like a work of art, like not just a bunch of like club songs.
Right.
And it's very, and I guess it's kind of common amongst like most Beastie Boys songs to be very dense, because you know, you have 3 people making it, they're all singing, and also very erratic. And of course, that's the Beastie Boys flavor. But to kind of mix in some of the things they're kind of experimenting with, like it gets pretty psychedelic in some places, and it gets kind of groovy, you know. And there are some songs like the song "I Don't Know," which is just like a complete departure from anything they've done.
Yeah.
Really. And even the last track on the song was Instant Death.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's definitely
which is dark, by the way. You know the background behind that song.
I know it's about addiction, right? Like it's about a friend of his who I think died of an overdose. Yeah. So it's kind of a weird. It's a really sad way to end the album.
Yeah.
But like to me, you know, when the album came out, like the 3 hits were Intergalactic Planetary, Body Movement, and I guess it was three MCs and 1 DJ. The 3 kind of big singles.
Yeah, Remote Control was also a single, but I don't think it ever got nearly the level that those 3 did. I
remember that being kind of pushed and it not really catching up. But three MCs and 1 DJ is pretty freaking awesome, I have to admit. I love that track. Like I haven't listened to it in years. I listened to it last night. I was like, oh, this is actually really sick.
Well, have you seen have you seen the video?
Yeah, I watched the video. That's why I like the
and
video.
I love the video version.
Yeah,
because it's all done live.
But I think that's just so fascinating because these three singles don't really reflect the album. Like,
right.
Like it's very like the 3 singles that are played. It kind of feels like the logical next step of a Beastie Boys oeuvre. But then you go a little bit deeper and it's like, whoa, these people are taking me places that like you don't really expect to go, especially in like a year like 1998. Yeah. I read some article that kind of said that there are tracks in here that you would guess you would probably think came from like a SoundCloud rapper because they get so experimental. So yeah, that's my initial. I really enjoyed it, Chuck. I thought it was a lot of fun, and it really kind of like. And of course, there definitely are songs in there where it's like, yeah, this is definitely made to like get high. Like, there's definitely songs in there where it's like, this is something you listen to on the couch. We got a bong, and you know.
It's interesting that you say that because in the song "Alive," which is meant to be a retrospective on their career to that point.
Okay.
I can't remember which Beastie Boy it is who raps the line. He says, "I don't smoke Chiba. I can't stand that crap."
Okay. So, well, I mean, maybe it's just meditating then. Maybe it's good for meditation. Like maybe.
Or that's that's a joke that we're just not privy to. Like,
I guess so. Yeah. That's just how they were. So yeah, those are my initial thoughts. I don't know if you want to share like a kind of a brief thing. I mean, you've talked a lot about the album itself, but I don't know if you have a.
Well, I mean, I'll tell about my thoughts listening to it again because I hadn't listened to it in years.
Okay.
You know, I'll have like, you know, I'll have my phone on like while driving and stuff, and I'll have, you know, it on shuffle, and a randomly, you know, song from the album will come on, and almost 9 times out of 10, it's like 3 MCs or Intergalactic, or Body Movement. So like to listen to all the tracks. I will say it does remind me of one of the things that frustrated me and kind of what gave birth to the whole Napster movement is that there are a few tracks on there that feel like filler.
Yeah.
that I'm not really sure that like, is this really like you feel passionate about this song? This is the thing you're dedicating like weeks of your life to making. Like, it just feels like, you know, they wanted to fill out something. I don't know.
Right.
But I will say the 3 singles are enormous and among the best of the Beastie Boys' songs. And then there are a couple of there are 3 or 4 non-singles that I think are huge and worth listening to. And I forgot how long this album is. It's 67 minutes long.
Yeah, I realized that too. Like, wow, this might be the longest one we've done, aside from, you know, the Hamilton.
Yeah, it's long, but and the other thing is, I would say my first thoughts were on listening to it with the intent of this episode was, I don't know how the hell to talk about this.
Well, I think, you know what I think it is, Jack? I think a lot of it is, for better or worse, a bit self-indulgent. Especially like the last track, or not the last track, the next to the last track, Dr. Lee, PhD, which feels 5 hours long.
Right. Which is just Lee Scratch Perry just doing whatever he wants to do.
Exactly. That's what I mean. It's kind of self-indulgent. I think what the filler part you're talking about, to me, that's sort of like, let's just add this layer and this layer and this layer and this layer. Yeah, that's cool. That's yeah.
Yeah, and when I said that, it feels like when I was trying to figure out how the hell to talk about this, is like I realized a little bit that like I can talk about Rumors, I can talk about Graceland. One, those are the recording process of those albums is really well documented.
Yeah.
And there's like there's dense stories behind both of those records. This was the first record I picked that didn't have that kind of like, you know, there wasn't like tragedy or trauma or anything going on in the background of the band. This wasn't a group of people trying to recapture their success. I mean, it was, there's no
VH1 behind the music.
Yeah.
Narrative going on.
Right. I mean, they had, the Beastie Boys had taken a 4-year break. This is the longest break. And I remember when it came out, it was sort of like, oh, wow, like they sort of, you know, they're showing up after being away for several years. But I realized that I can talk about those albums because like I understand how those albums are put together. Like I understand how you write a song and incorporate a guitar, bass, and drum. Like I understand the rock and roll musical structure. I listen to so much rock and alternative rock that I get that. Like I just get that style of music. It was when I started listening to this again, I was like, I don't know how do you deconstruct this? Because one, like the lyrics are so dense and like you have to listen to the lyrics and trying to like pay attention to that. But then there's also the range of sounds and things going on. Cause like one of the ways that I listen to music is I'll put on headphones, and then what I'll do is I'll isolate, like I'll try to isolate in my head a particular instrument, and I'll just try to listen to that instrument throughout the whole song.
Interesting.
And then like I'll listen to it again and pick another instrument, and that way I kind of get, you know, I can kind of picture how all the disparate parts are coming together. And like, you know, that's why another album I considered us talking about was Blink-182's self-titled album, 2003. That was one of those albums where like I listened to it and I could realize how much they were doing in the studio, and realize that like a lot of the stuff they were doing wouldn't translate to a live performance and stuff like that. So that's just the way I listen to music. Right. And I realized like with the Beastie Boys, I'd never done that. I never really paid attention to the sounds behind the lyrics. I paid attention to the lyrics. And so this time around I started that's why I started doing some reading about, and I found that website that shows like what's being sampled in all the songs, because like that's a statement too, right? When you're picking when you're sampling something, you're trying to make a statement about it. And
yeah, you sent Matt and I all the samples they use. I should have actually read it. I didn't really look into it.
Oh, it's okay.
Sorry.
It's all right. It's okay. I mean, once you start getting down that rabbit trail though, dude, like it gets you can get so lost in it. But which by the way, I did learn that they sample themselves a lot. Yeah. In this, and that's kind of interesting.
I did notice there's a few callbacks and stuff like.
Yeah. I shine on the mic like ultra bright. I think that's a line from another album as well, or one of their songs. But anyway, so my initial thoughts were, like I said, just like, I don't know how I was going to talk about it, but by reading up on a few things and starting to pay attention to things in the background, and starting to kind of see what they're doing with some of these songs is unbelievable. I mean, you've got Mixmaster Mike, who is a DJ, but he's a very particular kind of DJ. When we think of DJ now, we think of someone like Mixmaster Mike, meaning like a turntable person, like they call it turntablism, who is basically treating two turntables or more as an instrument, and is, making sounds based off of the scratches and the stops and the faders and running it through like effects pedals and all this kind of stuff. He was a pioneer of that. He was a part of a group of DJs that pioneered that kind of work. Earlier DJs mostly played music and then occasionally would like stop the record, scratch the record in order to get that verse to loop back around again or whatever.
Right.
I mean, if you pay attention to the DJ work, it's amazing what he's doing. And his familiarity with each track that he is using in order to get the beats out of it, to loop it right, he is a master, and he's treating it like anyone would who's like an expert at a guitar or whatever. I mean, just unbelievable. But then on top of that, you have like an Intergalactic, if you listen, you've got a live drummer playing an actual drum kit. Right. And that's another thing that people don't give the Beastie Boys credit enough for, is that they used actual musicians for their records. They didn't just use pre-recorded beats, or they didn't use like drum machines. They actually had an in-house drummer akin to like the Roots or something, playing these beats. So you have a DJ who is doing turntable work. You have drums, sometimes a guitar. Then you have someone who's playing samples and utilizing samples under all of that. So you just have these massive, like just a mass of different kinds of musical conventions happening. This is
basically like the bread and butter of Linkin Park, right? Like,
yes, exactly, the bread and butter of Linkin. I mean, I guess your way it is. Yeah,
I'm just trying to say like that is like what Linkin Park was too. Like
that's true.
Linkin Park wouldn't be Linkin Park if it wasn't for like the Beastie Boys.
That's true. That's a really fair point, because they had a DJ. Incubus is another band that utilizing a DJ, and but incorporating it in a much more conventional rock setting. Right. By the way, Linkin Park is one of those interesting bands that people are very dismissive of them as sort of lame new metal,
rap metal,
but they have a very different. But they're not like 311 or something, or Papa Roach or any of those kind of terrible bands. No. Linkin Park, and I think you realize particularly their rap bona fides when they did that mashup with Jay-Z.
Oh yeah, that was.
You realize they're actually they know what they're doing, and they're very talented at what they do. But yeah, so so that's that level of just layer of layering, and just that kind of musical density just really impressed me in what they're doing. And I think that it's something that doesn't get enough credit, and they don't get enough credit for that. I mean, I'm sure there are other rap artists that are doing similar things, but there's a layer to this. It's very different. And a mixture of genres and conventions that few other rap acts seem to be doing, or any other musical acts seem to be doing.
Yeah. All right. So do you want to, I had an idea of where we could probably, how we could kind of structure the talking about tracks.
Sure.
Do you want to just like go ahead and talk about the 3 hits, and then we could talk about our favorites we start with the hits and then go to the deep cuts?
Yeah, let's do that.
Because we can both talk about the hits, because that's already going to like overlap.
Right.
Okay, cool. So let's do that. We'll talk about the hits, and then we'll do the more deep cut stuff, and we'll say like which ones are your favorite tracks outside of the hits.
Sounds good.
Cool. All right. So let's talk about the hits of this song.
Let's do it.
And I think we should open it with Intergalactic Planetary.
It's just Intergalactic.
I knew that. I'm cool. I'm hip.
Let me tell you. It took me years before I realized that they were saying intergalactic, planetary, another dimension.
Oh, really?
With a vocoder. I never I never knew what it took me a very long time before I realized that's what they were saying.
I love it. This song, Chuck, it takes me back, buddy.
Yeah, dude.
This song dropped when I was in high school.
Mm-hmm.
I think I was 15 at the time. So sophomore year in high school, my favorite year in high school.
Okay. I was 16.
Yeah, I was in Cypress Creek actually, so living in Orlando. I remember when it came out, like everyone just loved it.
Mm-hmm.
Like you heard it in the hallways, you heard it at the lunchroom, you heard it everywhere you went. And I think what was kind of cool about it is Cypress Creek had like this kind of field day thing where like all the different classes were facing off against each other, some, I don't know, sports thing, whatever. And like whenever like somebody would make a point or something, they assigned a currently popular song to each class. And the sophomore class was Intergalactic. And we all lost our minds when we found out that they assigned that to us. And like on the other classes were like, oh, I wish we had that song. And so like whenever we scored some kind of point or whatever, it was just like crowds of high schoolers just singing along to Intergalactic. It was awesome. So yeah, I have a fondness for this song, and I love it very much. And the music video rules.
Yes.
And I think what's interesting about Chuck, you said earlier that like when you first heard them, I mean, when you first saw Intergalactic and you heard them, they're like on the same wavelength as you. I feel the same way whenever I watch any of their music videos.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like the first short film we made was RAs, which was like highly influenced by Sabotage.
We stole Sabotage.
Yeah. And or at least the music video for Sabotage. And I don't know.
We used the music.
No, I didn't use the music.
Aren't you?
I used the Kill Bill soundtrack.
Okay.
For that, the Battle Without Humanity or Honor.
Okay.
Yeah. But yeah, there were some people who were like, "This is like Sabotage." I'm like, shut up! I've always wanted to do this.
Kid, really quick, our viewers, this is okay. By the way, let me just say, I'm so glad we're talking about the Beastie Boys because there's an element to them that makes me feel like this is something you and I definitely like you, me, and Keelan sort of in college. Like there was something to this that was like, yeah, we're part of this. A kinship with them, and the fact. So RAs, for those who don't know, JP and I cooked up this idea. I was an RA, and we cooked up this idea of doing a movie or a show, right? It
was you and Keelan. You and Keelan had this idea for RAs, and like you told it to me, and I thought it was the funniest thing in the world.
We were getting for those in college, there's a role called the resident advisor, and we thought it'd be funny to treat it as though you're a cop, like a '70s cop show. And so, and I mean, to be honest, Keelan and I were obsessed with the Sabotage video, and that's really what put the idea in our head. And so, but we thought that'd be really funny. We had this whole idea of doing like a short film with like a plot and everything around it. And we ended up just sort of making a music video.
And then you became friends with me. And like, I turned it into like it was like a trailer.
It was a trailer. Yeah.
Yeah.
And God would see, we waterboarded a kid for it.
That was the best.
We took a kid and put his head in a nasty fountain.
He was a trooper.
He was a trooper. James took it and dunked his head like repeatedly in a fountain. Like we're trying to get a confession out of him. Remember when we put like sugar or something to make like lines of Coke?
It was brown sugar because we couldn't find any sugar.
Yeah. And it was and so they made lines of Coke, and like Keelan and I busted in and like beat this kid up. We caught him but I remember when we did the whole shot with that kid James, you took many takes of where he ran out of that door that's up that really terrifying steep staircase outside of Rinker Hall at PBA.
Yeah.
And then Keelan and I immediately came out like people have to appreciate the fact that I had on a members only jacket, a polyester dress shirt with an enormous wide tie, and like burnt orange polyester pants.
Yeah.
Did I have a mustache?
You had. I think this is when you had chops.
This is when I had my pork chop sideburns, my long hair, and enormous sunglasses, and I had an airsoft gun.
Yeah,
and
Yeah.
And a badge. And like I kicked open the door and I yelled, "RAs, freeze!" And it was happening like as classes were letting out, and kids were like, "What is going on around here?"
And it was great. I had Keelan would take out like in his vest and aviators and stuff, and I had him like running on top of cars and stuff like that.
Oh, that's right. Do you still have that footage?
Somewhere I do. I know I have to have it somewhere.
I would love to see that again. It was so much fun.
Yeah. The reason I bring it up is because there is one shot in the Intergalactic video that I tried to recreate with you and Keelan. It's the snap zoom on the three of them as they're running toward the camera. I did the exact same shot with you and Keelan running down the alley towards the camera.
That's right.
So like they heavily inspired me. Like, but all their music videos were like that.
Yeah, so they used Spike Jonze for crying out loud.
Well, Spike Jonze. Well, they also directed them themselves. According to my research, Body Move and Intergalactic were directed by I think Adam Yash.
Really? I thought Spike Jonze did both those videos.
Spike Jonze, I think, did their very early stuff. So What You Want. I know
he did that.
Spike Jonze.
I could have sworn like all the ones involving them in like goofy costumes and stuff were directed by, but I guess you're right.
Directed by them, but they were friends with Spike Jonze, so of course they look like Spike Jonze. They look like Spike Jonze music videos.
I guess, yeah. Spike Jonze did Sabotage.
Yes, that's right. He did. Yeah. So I mean, that's why they look like Spike Jonze music, because they're the same thing. So like heavily influenced by all of that. What was I going to say? Where was it? Oh yeah. So yeah, I love the song. I don't know. I didn't really like kind of go deep into the lyrics and what they mean, because to me it's just a bop, right? Like it's just like a fun, awesome song. And the lyrics are hilarious. My favorite part in it to this day is Ad Rock's. There's a part where Ad Rock just kind of like goes insane.
Oh yeah.
You know what I'm talking about? He says it's like, now when I wrote graffiti and my name was Slop, if my rap suit, my beats is stock, step from the table when I start to chop, I'm the lumberjack, a DJ Ad Rock. Like he goes insane that part. Like I always thought that was hilarious. And it's my favorite part to rap to. And
in the video, they like speed him up.
Yeah.
So it looks like he's going nuts.
I love that part. And like the verse it leads into, I'm sure, is like part of one of your favorites because they mentioned Mr. Spock, right?
Yeah. Right, which of course leads to one of my favorite like nerd conversations to have is the fact that Kirk listens to the Beastie Boys and the Kelvin Timeline Star Trek, and they regularly reference the original Star Trek TV show and a Mr. Spock. So when Kirk met Spock, was he like, huh? Did they not have the video to check it out?
I think maybe World War III happened before 1998, right? Is that
maybe?
I don't know.
No, because they listen. They know because they listen to Body Movin' Into Darkness.
Yeah. What were you thinking, JJ? Come on.
JJ Abrams loves Beastie Boys.
He does. It's really funny how much he loves Beastie Boys and Oasis, apparently.
Well, because there's that alien in The Force Awakens named Slow and Low.
Okay.
You know, I'm talking about the guy who has the alien has sort of like the Fu Manchu like mustache thing.
All right. Yeah.
Who he's one of the X-Wing pilots. His name is Slow and Low. And then there's another alien. That same species is the one that isn't that the same species that JGL Joseph Gordon-Levitt plays? He voices in.
I don't remember.
Because there's another one in The Force Awakens, in The Last Jedi, and they named him. Oh my gosh, what do they name him? Because they're Slow and Low. I was going to drive me nuts because he's titled after another Beastie Boys song, and it's become like the convention that alien species, all of their names are Beastie Boys references.
That's so funny.
It'll come to me later, but yeah.
Cool. So I'm guessing Intergalactic is it's your song. That's like it's your.
I love the song. I love the video. Yeah. The video, of course, being that it's set in Tokyo and it has giant monsters, and it's just clearly, to me, it comes across as a video made by people who spent their Saturday mornings as kids watching Japanese B-movie monster movies and watch shows like Ultraman and stuff like that, which I had totally grown up watching as well. And so that was when like I said, that video made me like, I had to have the album after I saw that video, because I just knew like this were a group of people that I would get, and they seemed to get me. And growing up as a fairly weird kid in a very Christian environment, like I needed that.
Yeah.
I needed to know that there was someone else out there who really liked guys in rubber suits, like rubber monster suits, destroying cardboard cities, and like loved it, not making fun of it.
Right.
And like, you know, and then like with the Body Moving video is another one, you know, there's a lot of influences on like 1960s spy movies and things that just.
Yeah, that's influenced by a spy movie called Danger Diabolique or Diabolic.
Yeah. And so like the fact that like they clearly had seen some of the same things I had seen. And this was like, you know, this was in the early days of where people were referencing old video games and old TV shows in their music. You know, like, I mean, there's a song on here. One of the songs in here it might be the Move that like references Thurston Howell III from is that Gilligan's Island?
I think so.
Yeah. So again, like this was very clear to me. These were people who had that, you know, they were older than me, but they had similar interests that I had even at this age, you know, as a kid growing up on watching TV Land, you know, playing old video games and watching giant monster movies and listening to punk rock. It was like, these guys get that. They get that life. You know, they're hanging out with, you know, people like Spike Jonze, who was famous for making skateboard videos. So yeah.
We directed So What You Want music video, which is my favorite Beastie Boys song.
Great. And also, of course, then wanted to direct Where the Wild Things Are.
Yes. Cool. So that's Intergalactic. Let's talk about I'm going to stir fry you in my walk. I don't know. I just like saying that.
Stir fry you in my walk. Yeah. Some great little lines in this. Yeah.
Yeah, dude. There's also
coming from Uranus to check my style.
I love my sugar with coffee and cream.
Oh yeah. Well, what is it? The very first line of the whole album is 50 cups of coffee and you know it's on.
Yeah.
I love that line.
And I love the music video. It's just like the giant robot comes to Earth and he's just like, and he lands in the middle of the city. Everyone's scared. Everyone runs away. But he's just dancing. Like he's not bothering anybody.
He's just popping and locking.
I mean, he breaks that one window, but like he's just he's doing the robot, and then someone like comes to mess with him, like, no, leave him alone. He's just dancing.
Yeah, he's not trying to hurt anybody.
And I love all the shots of them and those construction outfits, like doing the Power Ranger poses and stuff. Like that's iconic to me, man. Like that is so cool. Like that's like something I wish I could come up with.
Oh yeah. Again, they were having fun.
Absolutely.
And that was like before like Blink-182 came along and we're like doing similar things, you know, being obnoxious and having fun.
Absolutely. So I guess we can move on to like Body Moving.
Yep.
Which is you know, I feel like if you don't like Beastie Boys, you probably find that to be a very obnoxious song.
Yeah.
That's where they started incorporating Fatboy Slim, right? Is that
well, no, okay. So Fatboy Slim did the remix, which was used in the music video version of it, which is and was played on the radio a lot. The album version is not Fatboy Slim. There's no involvement with Fatboy Slim.
Okay.
But it's,
I didn't listen to the album version, so sorry.
It's all right. The album version is actually a fairly shockingly dense song because some very interesting references in it because it samples Oye Como Vai. And I can't remember the other song, but like, you know, if you listen to that steel drum line that's in that song, it's just very interesting what's going on musically with that. But yeah, and then of course they're sampling from 1970 a record that's basically teaching you how to dance.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's what that like. Take it one step to the left and repeat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I didn't notice that they say "flame on," which is
yes, flame on. I'm gone. I'm so sweet like a nice bonbon.
Yeah. I guess I don't really have much to say, so except for I really love the music video.
Well, let me just say, this is one of these albums where I think it's tough to talk about it without talking about the videos. It was very much in like the golden age of MTV. And it, you know, it's and the videos are just so iconic, and they tied into the overall aesthetic of the record in a way that not too many other albums ever, or, have. It's you just like when I listen to Intergalactic, I see the video. When I listen to Body Movin', I see the video. Like they just they're inescapable.
Yeah, it was also a pretty popular video. Like when I was in high school, we were in high school. Like we had, they did the announcements over like their own TV channel, right? Which is like a lot of high schools. I don't know if they still do that, but it was pretty popular back in our day. And they would always show music videos before they started. And Body Movement, I got played like once a week. Every week for the entire school year. To the point where and it was funny because like in the one class I had where that video would come up, people would just be like, oh, because it was early in the morning, and you just had like an English class, and then like Body Movement has that sort of repetitive sound to it where it's like, if you haven't had your coffee yet, it's like, I don't need this right now.
Yeah.
Okay, so I mean, is there anything else? I don't know. Sorry, I don't really have.
Good song. I mean, I just feel like that one is a good song.
Yeah. Okay, so let's talk about the other one, which is
3 MCs.
3 MCs and 1 DJ.
Really quick, I have 2 things I want to say. The end of Body Movin', right? That end of Body Movin' is the one that, if you're listening to it all the way through, that's one that ends that great, like that random thing where the guy is like, what I think would be nice? So I wish that I could go outside and play basketball in the rain without getting wet. And then it gets right into Mixmaster Mike's voicemail.
Right.
Which I love that they include that as the intro to the song. What a perfect way to introduce this song is to have, Adam, this is Mixmaster Mike. I want to collaborate with you on a couple of tracks.
Right.
I got some stuff right here, and you just hear like him, like the idea that it comes across like an amateur. And I love it. It's like, because when I first listened to this album, my friend Josh and I were like, oh, this is hilarious. Like they've got, like our initial assumption was, they've got some like really crappy DJ. Like they recorded a phone call from this crappy DJ who wanted to collaborate with them, and they're making fun of this guy. And then you listen, you're like, oh no, he's actually really good. Yeah,
he's awesome. I love this song. Like it's just it's such a like a bare bones.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's really stripped down. It's not like super produced. It's 3 MCs and 1 DJ, and they're recording in like a small room. I mean, is the setting that the video takes place? Is that kind of like, is that pretty true to like how it was recorded? Like, is that?
I believe where they recorded the videos, where they recorded the album version of the song. The album version of the song has a little bit more production in it. If you watch the video, which the video is hilarious, because I love that they're just standing in their apartment posing.
Yeah, and he's coming and
big buzzing, and nobody, and like one guy looks at it and and then he's wearing the Ghostbusters backpack for no reason.
That's what I was saying. He's a Ghostbuster for some reason.
And I love that, but the video is completely live. Like they did that in one, like that's one take, I think.
You can tell because how it was, the cameras were set up and stuff.
Yeah, and which is cool because the beat of that song is great, and it's entirely done through the turntable. That is all based off of the way he's hitting the record to get that sound, which is, I mean, everything that goes on. I mean, just listening to it. I listened to it on my way over to record today. Just like I cannot wrap my head around how you make turntables make those sounds.
I know. Yeah, I've always been kind of fascinated with that. That the amount of talent it has to take to just kind of like to turn that into an instrument.
Well, my friend Josh, he and I mean, we as a result of that song, we both developed an obsession with turntables and that whole DJ thing, to the extent that that Josh went out and bought like 2 Technics turntables to try to like figure out how to do that work. I don't know if he got the fader and all that stuff, but there's a really funny story about that. If I ever have him on the show, I'll have him share it, because he got a lot of trouble for that because he wasn't supposed to buy them. But yeah, it's just, if you're to me, it's like it's the best song to listen to if somebody is ever dismissive of DJing. It's like, oh, you're just playing other people's music. Oh no, listen to this guy, because this is there's some real talent involved in what he's doing.
Yeah. And then the music video is like something I would show at a film festival.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. I love that aesthetic. Like I love I love they did it live, which is great, which I love. And then the way the cameras are set up, I like, to me, that's just like a really cool aesthetic to me. That really appeals to me. That gives it that sort of like almost kind of like an acoustic kind of thing. Like it's sort of their acoustic song in a way.
Right.
Even though there is an acoustic song in this album that actually is an acoustic song.
Yeah.
But 9 Inch Nails did something similar like 10 years ago with The Hand That Feeds. But there's more movement. They had the cameras do more movement, but it was kind of the same idea, and it's actually really cool. Look at the video for that, by the way, if you're interested in more stuff like that. That's The Hand That Feeds. Right?
Well, and again, I mean, the fact that you mentioned that you would show this at a film festival again is part of what also another element of what made the Beastie Boys, especially Hello Nasty, appealing to me, is that it appeals to artsy people. There's an artistry to what they're doing. They're doing artsy things. They're not just, you know, goofing off, which a lot of their previous records sound like they're kind of goofing off. I mean, Paul's Boutique, I think, is a bit of an exception because that's a really amazing artistic statement. But this feels like they had some European, you know, musical and artistic sensibilities that they're folding into what they're doing.
Yeah.
I mean, I one time read a review of this. They referred to it as a Euro pop record.
I could see that totally.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah. I would put 3 MCs and 1 DJ on like a video art installation. Like that would work.
Yeah.
So cool. So let's all right, let's kind of move on a little bit. You want to start getting into the deep cuts?
Yeah, let's get into some deep cuts because I mean we could talk about Remote Control, but because it's the other single off of it, but it wasn't really that. I don't know that it was that big of a hit.
Right, it's up to you if you want to talk
about it. I mean, going through. I mean, one of the things that we've talked about this, the hip hop album. It's important to note, I think, also that, and as like you said, you just go off these big hits, you get a sense, you get sort of an idea of an album that it is that Hello Nasty is not. Okay. It really is in many ways a quieter, you know, artsy album with a lot of lounge, bossa nova, and jazz elements in it. You know, because it's got a number of these songs that are instrumentals, like Sneaking Out the Hospital, which is great. By the way, I have the Beastie Boys, what is it? The In Sound from the Far Out or whatever, which is their instrumental compilation, because they've done several instrumental albums or instrumental songs over the years. So they made a compilation of just their instrumental pieces and put it on a CD, and it's really, really neat to listen to. I mean, oh gosh, it's really tough for me to like pick a few, but I'll keep it simple. I really like later on down the album. Like the Grasshopper Unit, Keep Moving, which is a song right after 3 MCs, is a great song. Don't really have much to say on it. It's a great song. But the two that outside of the hits that I listen to the most are the Negotiation Limerick File.
Oh yeah. I have that one.
And because I really like that like space pan sound that they use for the percussion. And it's got a very Eastern sound to it. And I just really like the sound of it. And I really like the fact that the rapping is a little more subdued. They're not yelling their lyrics and as they often do. And then I love
it's in the style of a limerick.
Right, it's in the style of limerick. And I also like Electrify, which is a song right after that. And I like Electrify because they use a Rachmaninoff song. They use a piece of Rachmaninoff music to, I think, or no, Stravinsky. It's Stravinsky, classical music for the song. But the way it sounds with these big like zun 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 zun, it always made me think of like a Godzilla movie. Like it sounds like Akira Ifukube's scores from various Toho Godzilla like monster movies. And to the extent that my friend Josh and I thought of it that they had sampled some kind of kaiju score, you know, from Ultraman or something. But it wasn't until I researched this that I realized that it was a Stravinsky song and not from a giant monster movie. But I like that because I like that they have this. It opens with like, it sounds like it's like sampling crickets or something. And then it goes into this big, like, I mean, sorry, I'm about to play this by accident. And then it goes right into these big, like cello bass, like upright bass sounds. And they're using that as the bass, as the beat line for this rap song. I mean, it's just, you know, it's it's great, and it fits. Like, you know, there's this song is called Electrify, and even though they're using these organic sounds, it sounds electric. It's just and it's just, that's a song those are the two songs outside the big hits that I come to a lot. Song for the Man, little subdued bit,
that's I think that song is when it started to really separate my expectations. It started to really kind of like subvert who they were,
right?
Right? Because that's when they start to get that because I have that on my list too. That's when it starts to get kind of psychedelic and experimental and jazzy, and it's and just like the lyrics and stuff. I don't know how to explain like the effect they were using when they're, you know, doing the vocals. But it's like, that's where I was like, okay, this is like when I used to listen to that reggae station in West Palm Beach, like, right. So that's a really cool song. Yeah, I just wanted to note that. Yeah, it's
you know, and I love that the album opens with Super Disco Breakin'. I love that. I like that song.
Oh, I did too.
That it sets the tone for the whole record. That initial like like
great sampling of that song.
Yeah, and like I said, the first line of the song is 50 cups of coffee and you know it's on. Which what a opening salvo for this, because the album does seem like you've had a lot of coffee and you're really energetic up front, and then you start to kind of crash, and then you get a second burst, and then you just sort of, you know, then it's instant death at the end. You know, it's you know, it sets that. It's just great. It's a great. And it's a song I think about almost every morning when I have coffee. It's like 50 cups of coffee and you know it's on.
Nice. Okay. So is that
I mean, those are the ones outside of it. I mean, again, like, this is where it's tough for me to talk about this because, you know, I mean, I'm glad we're not doing this year round, trying to go track by track, because you start getting into like, oh, well, they're sampling this and this track, and that, you know, and that's communicate. It can get really dense and boring. Right. The hits are really fun to talk about. And again, like, I don't want to be exhaustive in trying to, like, you know, analyze the meaning of this lyric or whatever. I mean, because again, it's very artsy and electric and Euro poppy, but it's also fun, and I, you know, and a lot, and it's, you know, I just, you know, you should just listen to the album.
Well, I got a little carried away and an analysis for one song.
That's good. Go for it.
Most of the songs we've already kind of, you talked about in your list, so I'm not going to, you know, retread like Super Disco Breakin', Song from the Man. But Putting Shame in Your Game. Okay. It's like this mix of irreverent humor and also just like surprisingly spiritually conscious. Yeah. Like a bird floating down on a New York breeze, every thought in the mind is a planted seed. So watch the mind or the thoughts will stack before you know it, they're boomeranging on back. Like, this is all. It's mind expanding, right? Like, right. And I can keep going. This verse here: time's an illusion as the mountains race by, too fast to really grasp, though we may try. Deny till we die. Oh my. These thoughts that mislead and then multiply second by second, any minute by minute, and minute by minute. Like, this is. I don't know. Am I thinking too much?
No, I mean, well, I mean, I think it's one of the important things when talking about the Beastie Boys in general is to talk about MCA's Buddhism and his Tibetan activism, because he put on I mean, they hosted, you know, a big, you know, Free Tibet concert. I mean, that whole Free Tibet thing from the 90s resulted from the Beastie Boys. I mean, they were big movers in all of that. His MCA's Buddhism came, you know, after after License to Ill, and I think that's one of the reasons why the Beastie Boys realized how kind of bothered they were that record had for them and what it had kind of done. And so that, you know, that elevated, you know, because I mean, again, License to Ill has songs like Paul Revere, which is and Brass Monkey, which are, you know, really vulgar, profane songs that are funny and all of that. But there's there's not really they're kids. They're songs that young obnoxious New York kids are doing. Like for instance, so I went to New York with Canada years ago, and we were in Brooklyn getting on the train, and there were these like 3 or 4 guys, young, teenagers or older teenagers, that were they were in sweatshirts and sneakers, the whole, there's urban kids, and they were obnoxious, and they were just kids. Anyway, one of them grabbed like this really large icicle. It was winter, and they had this large icicle, and the kid like held it in front of him like it was a phallus, and he like, they were joking, goofing off, showing that, and then the train was coming, and he walked to the edge of the platform and had it like hanging over the tracks, and he like swung it as the train arrived. So like he hit the front of the train with this phallus icicle thing, and it exploded all over the platform, and they were laughing and all this stuff. And I mean, I remember Kane and I were like, wow, that's super dangerous. But when I saw these guys, I was like, that's what I imagined that the Beastie Boys were like when they were teenagers, when they first got their career started. They were acted just like these kids, these Brooklyn rat kids. And I realized that's who records License to Ill. Yeah. That's not who records Hello Nasty. Yeah. Because in the interim, MCA becomes a Buddhist, and that Buddhism suddenly makes them mature. I mean, they obviously grow. I mean, they're in their 30s when they're recording, they're closer to our age when they're recording Hello Nasty. Yeah. So, they've matured in general as people, but they have this spirituality to it. And that spirituality leads them to kind of look back on their early legacy and realize that there were some troubling things that they had done. And I think and on top of that, it informs a lot of their thought and their spirituality going forward. And they definitely incorporate that into a lot of their music. I mean, I think it's Check Your Head that has like a mantra, like a song that's like just a straight up like mantra. It's like, I think it's called Shambhala or something in it, or something like that. And like that lyric that you just quoted, that's a very Zen-like. Those are all like very Zen-like Buddhist statements. Watching a bird descend. Time is an illusion as mountains speed by. I mean, and
there's another where it says we're all connected like Legos. Like,
yeah, like that's yeah. And it's an interesting thing because a lot of hip hop has incorporated spirituality into it. I mean, DMX's albums are full of these really elaborate prayers and things that he's incorporated in them over the years. And, a number of rap artists have become Muslims and then tried to incorporate some, Muslim concepts into, and that's of course tied to the black Muslim movement. That's been a big part of black culture for a while now. And so the fact that it's not unheard of, but to have some really, really, Far Eastern, East Asian, spirituality incorporated into music like that was something that we hadn't really seen too much of in a while. And of course comes at and this is being introduced in there's got to be a zeitgeist because the Matrix is just coming down the pike, and it's going to incorporate a lot of Buddhist spirituality into a very big blockbuster thing. Right. So, and,
I think what's interesting is like, I'm kind of I'm interested in how this happened to them. And like the fact that they were all sort of able to embrace it together. Like it wasn't just MCA and his Buddhism. It seems like something that would happen in a band and it would like break them up. Right. Right. But it didn't. And then you had like, Adam Horovitz. I just had to look this up because I was kind of briefly familiar with it. Adam Horovitz started dating or married Kathleen Hanna, who was the front person for the band Bikini Kill, which is if you don't know your punk and alternative history, Kathleen Hanna was the person who inspired Kurt Cobain's "Smells Like Teen Spirit." She's the one that actually spray painted "Kurt Smells Like Teen Spirit" on the wall, and that's what inspired the song. But she had her own band called Bikini Kill, which is a part of the Riot Girl movement, which is like super feminist punk rock, right? Based around like sort of the punk scene and zines and stuff, right? And just for the record, Riot Girl is spelled GRRL. Yeah, look it up. Girl. It's a great music came out of that scene, especially Bikini Kill with their song Rebel Girl, which is one of my all-time favorite songs. And there's a great documentary that I think it's on Netflix. It was a Netflix documentary that they did on Kathleen Hanna. Anyway, so she's super feminist. She married Adam Horovitz, and I'm sort of kind of wondering, like, you know, what is influencing all this for this band? And I think, you know, maybe she had a pretty big influence as well in that.
Well,
but, yeah.
Well, and I think, another element of this too is Rick Rubin's a Buddhist. And I don't know if he was a Buddhist when he first signed them. I'd have to look that information up. But I think that the Beastie Boys were, as a group, a little more, I mean, considering they were hanging around the, you know, this punk scene that gave birth to like the Riot Grrrl movement and all of that. I mean, I think they already had some of that in them. The problem is that, to begin with, they saw their the rap thing as a joke. You know, they were punks first and rap artists second. And I think that License to Ill is largely, again, I think, as they've said, it's a joke that a lot of people didn't get. They didn't, I mean, the fact that they were going, you know, they weren't going by their real names, they were going by these rap artist names. I think they saw it as personas, right? It's kind of like, I mean, it's kind of like Slim Shady versus Marshall Mathers, or, Eminem. Is a white rap artist, has, you know, multiple personas. You know, his real name is Marshall Mathers. Eminem is his stage name, but he also has the character Slim Shady, who is a very disturbing individual and is not to be, you know, is not to be taken seriously. Like, that's not, like, Eminem's a complicated character, a complicated musical figure. But again, I think that, you know, that there is an element in that that's in a lot of hip hop, and I think that it was a joke that they were aware that it was a joke when they made it. They realized after the fact that no one else got the joke, and that it gave birth to a very problematic. I mean, like, you know, people who were listening to jock rock like Winger were listening to License to Ill, and like embracing it and not realizing that they're actually making fun of them the whole time.
Right. And it was pretty, when Kathleen Hanna started dating Ad-Rock, it was pretty controversial amongst her scene, because they saw as like selling out, as like, you know, oh, you're dating this like misogynistic, like super problematic person. Like, what's up? But that wasn't really the case. You know, I think they were very progressive, very forward thinking.
Yeah, I'm looking up the lyric. There's a lyric to in a song Alive by the Beastie Boys, which again is, you know, up there as my favorite songs of theirs. And this is where they do a lot to call out their own history. And it says, because I know there's this one line that let me just say that they really, Alive in particular, I think, is what changed a lot for me spiritually and politically. So here we go. We got, where is it? I'm taking duty rhymes to a brand new height, which is funny because there's a joke about there. I shine on the mic like ultra bright, created a monster with these rhymes I write. Goatee metal rap, please say goodnight. Wow. So that's the acknowledgement of the fact that, like, they created a monster with, that's their acknowledgement of. I mean, when I heard this, I was like, oh, they're talking about License to Ill. And then it goes on. He says, now, who in the world do you want to fight? It's against the system we should unite. Homophobics ain't all right. If you learn to love, then you might love life.
Yeah. And
then it goes on to say, here we go. This is a long line but I love it. Now you can shuffle numbers, but facts is facts. So many billionaires while so many lacks. So before the poor decide to react, well, come on, party people, share up your stacks. Now I'm gonna break it down to the brass tacks. Do the Bismarck dance in the Cabbage Patch. You tried to turn the key, but then you broke the latch, sneaking through my files for some rhymes to snatch. Okay, that line is a different thing. But it says, I'd like to have a say on the income tax. I think about this line probably like once or twice a week, by the way. I'd love to say I have a say on the income tax. Don't want to help build bombs, and that's the facts. No money for healthcare, so what's the catch? The man got you locked with no keys to the latch.
Damn.
Yeah. So this is the same group that again wrote, I did it like this, I did it like that, I did it with a wiffle ball bat. The far cry. And and you're starting to see the beginnings of that kind of consciousness, throughout the records, but really like, Hello Nasty has, again, like you're pointing out with is a Song for the Man?
No, it was Putting Shame in Your Game.
Sorry, Putting Shame in Your Game, right? So that's that they're starting to acknowledge some of their legacy around that.
Which is kind of funny now that I think about it, like the title of Putting Shame in Your Game, it kind of, when I first heard it, it kind of sounds like a diss, like I'm going to put shame in your game, but it's like, no, like maybe you should be more aware, like you need to have more shame, I guess. You know what I mean? Like, tempering your game, right?
Yeah. No, I think that's exactly what they're referencing in that. And then the song right after that is let me pull up the track list real quick.
I think that it was the one that was it Song for Junior?
No. It's Flow and Prose. Flow and Prose is the one that ends with the whole like line about like Marcus Garvey and His Holiness the Dalai Lama and Gandhi and all this stuff, right? I mean, and that's the by the way, is Intergalactic the one that says going Om like Gandhi, Umbaye, or is that Alive? Anyway, but so like that, so like here, I mean, and I just put this personally because you brought this, you're bringing this topic up. Yeah. I mean, being this, I was 16, a 16-year-old Baptist kid, fascinated with Asian culture and Asian philosophy, starting to beginning to feel really dissatisfied with my church. I'm having to rebel against this system that, my mom has felt pressure to enforce it. She was a little more lax on things than like some of the pastors in my church were, but, they're forcing me, saying, you shouldn't listen to non-Christian music. You need to only do that. You basically keep yourself entrenched in this Christian ghetto. And I'm starting to begin to kick against it. I've been attracted to punk rock and skateboarding. So it's already given me a sort of oppositional, defiance issue. I fight with authority on a daily basis at my school. And I'm listening to this. So I'm driving around Orlando, listening to these lyrics, listening to this group talk about this stuff, and they're introducing thoughts and ideas. I'd like to think that I'm a pacifist. And I think that my pacifism first began from listening to the Beastie Boys, as weird as it is. Yeah. Because one, to be able to criticize your roots and to reevaluate what you've done and to sort of say, hey, what I did as a kid might not have been great. That's something I've always kind of respected, when you're willing to kind of call out your own legacy and admit when you've been wrong. And, that's repentance. I mean, it's a Christian act of repentance.
Especially if it's a joke, because they could just be like, oh, it's a joke. Stop taking it so seriously. Right. But they're like, no, we probably shouldn't have told the joke.
Right. Like, yeah, I mean, it's like any toxic person who's just like, I'm just joking. Why be so serious about it? Like you realize, well, sometimes the joke is not a joke. And so I wonder how many other people have had this kind of impact, have been impacted this way by a group like the Beastie Boys, and, because again, like they're incorporating this stuff, but they're not like, it's not like George Harrison, right? Like George Harrison, made his music about his Buddhism or his Hinduism and about his beliefs in karma, or sorry, it wasn't his Hare Krishnaism. He made his music about that. And so like, it was front, like, in the forefront. And that was like, he was, telegraphing it, everything that he did. Right. You have, so he was basically like a Christian artist, his wearing his religion on his sleeve, and it became a defining marker. Right. We both grew up with Christian acts that did all of that. One of the things we haven't acknowledged, by the way, is that the band DC Talk began as a Christian spin on the Beastie Boys.
Oh, I can see that. Yeah. Christian alternative.
Yeah. But here's a group where their spirituality, their religious beliefs, their convictions, all of it are just so ingrained that it just comes out of them. And they're not trying to they're not putting it front and center because they don't need to put it front and center. This is what you get now. And that influence and how that for me got me to start, challenging and thinking about stuff I know was really important. So I wonder, I mean, I don't know if you had any kind of.
No, I mean, not really. I mean, it's interesting and illuminating to see. And I love a story about people kind of recognizing who they were and distancing themselves from that, because it probably was problematic in their lives. You know, I just think it's personally kind of fascinating, and I find it to be really kind of inspiring. Does it sort of kind of inspire my own spiritual beliefs? I don't really know. I didn't really look that deep into what they're saying, you know, but it's I think it's fascinating, and I think it is sort of a kind of a telling sign of the time in which it came out, because, you know, I mentioned earlier about sort of Madonna going through sort of the same thing. I remember that happening. I think probably I think didn't this album drop the exact same year as Ray of Light, or did Ray of Light come out like a year earlier?
I don't know, because this came out in '98. So
I think Ray of Light was like a year earlier.
Was it? I feel like it was later.
No, I remember being in middle school, like when
Ray of, really, like, because I feel like Ray of Light, because that's the same album with like Frozen, right?
Yeah, that's when that was her big like rebirth. That song, which is a great video, by the way. I love that video.
It came February 22nd, 1998. It was recorded in 1997.
Okay, so yeah, same here. And it's just kind of interesting, the parallel. Like Madonna and Beastie Boys don't really have much to do with each other, but these two albums, that's something I noticed about that album, was that she went through like sort of a rebirth in her style of music. She used a lot of electronica, a lot of techno. At least that's what they called it back then.
Yeah. Interestingly, I mean, the Beastie Boys were recording this. The Beastie Boys were recording this around the same time she was recording her stuff. But this album came out in July. She came out in February. But yeah, either way, like, it's clearly a zeitgeist there's some kind of a zeitgeist being tapped into.
Yeah. Because that's when she was starting to get into Kabbalah, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, that's right. Good point. Yeah. And I think, you know, this is an interesting thing, and it's the tail end of the 90s. Yeah. And, you know, we had gone through a period of, the beginning of the 90s, of course, very dark. You know, I mean, grunge comes out in the 90s, and it's not, you know, it's not a positive time.
Right.
You know, I mean, there's some degree of, I guess, affluence, but like, you know, it's a kind of a negative time. You know, the excesses of the 80s gives way to grunge. But then, you know, pop music and things toward the end of the decade start to really, you know, things kind of get a more positive, you know, people start getting a little more positive. But then you get a lot of excess in pop music and in particularly hip hop. And so to have a pop star like Madonna, and, you know, whose career started in the 80s, just like the Beastie Boys started in the 80s, you mentioned the fact that they toured together, that they come out at the end of the decade with this very conscious spiritual thing.
And it's not just a belief, but it's reflected in the actual style of the music. Like, you know,
right.
Goes from being
and Moby is active at this time too.
Yeah.
His career is starting to take off at this time, and he's doing a lot of similar things. Of course, he's, you know, on a different level. You know, he's not nearly as popular as they are, but
yeah. I think a thesis could be written on these two albums about Ray of Light and Hello Nasty. And then maybe I should have chosen Ray of Light for my album. Next year.
I will say I have a really hard time with Madonna as an artist, because so much has been out there about how much she steals from people.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Oh yeah. Oh, you didn't know that? She's
so Chuck, use this album in a sermon. Let me hear it.
Use this album in a sermon?
Yeah. For youth kids back in the 90s.
You know, God's love is truly intergalactic. And it is planetary, because it's for the entire world. And he comes out of another dimension in order to touch you with his intergalactic love.
That's good. And, you know, when Jesus was resurrected in the tomb, it got his body moving.
Well, let me just say, you know, I feel that as a pastor, my job is to, you know, to basically sample things from pop culture and scripture and put it together. And in some ways, and put a mix on it. So I'm kind of like a DJ, right? I'm a DJ. But you know what? The Father, Son, the Holy Spirit, those are the three MCs. And they're the ones who really give me the words that I just have to put up.
I don't know why, but like I was just thinking of like the transfiguration, and then like it just turns into a sick beat. Like two prophets and one savior. Like,
oh, that's funny. That's funny. But no,
okay. Well, cool. Well, Chuck, thank you for choosing this album. I had a blast listening to it. It was fun. It was fun. It's always fun revisiting, those 3 hits, and especially the music videos. But it was a very interesting experience, really diving deep,
man,
into what this album is. And like I said, I mentioned this before the podcast started. This is actually the first time I've listened to an entire Beastie Boys album.
Yeah.
As much as I love them, and I do love them, it's not because I didn't like them. I just never did. Like I said, I'm musically, like, I'm not,
Well, and it's also one of those things where there are a few acts out there that them mostly. I mean, like I like Lady Gaga. I've never listened to an entire Lady Gaga album. She's right. I listened to a lot of her singles, and I like a lot of her singles. And I think this is one of those kinds of groups you like, and that's totally normal and understandable. And I'm not going to give any judgment. I'm over that kind of like, what? You never, what kind of fan are you? Like,
yeah, exactly.
Which I credit you. I credit you with, by the way. You've helped me stop being that kind of TV jerk type. So
I'm glad I could inspire that. That's cool. Even though I judge people all the time internally, but.
Well, all right. We all do that, right? We all do that. Nice. But maybe we can learn something from MCA and his spirituality, and it will make us better people.
Absolutely. And pour one out for MCA.
Yeah, dude. Yeah, dude. And I just, as an addendum to this, listen to the single "Alive" because it should have been on this album. And if it had been on this album, I think it would have been a bigger track. It may be their best song. I have a 12-inch vinyl single of it that I've had for years that I only recently got to listen to because I finally own a record player that I could listen to it on. Alive is great. And it's sort of it's of a piece with the themes of this album, and the video is also really good. I also want to say, I finally give out another little secret of I had a strategy this year.
Yeah.
So the first album that I picked for Music Mayhem was Paul Simon's Graceland, which came out in the 80s. We followed that up the next year with Rumors by Fleetwood Mac, which came out in the 70s. So now I picked an album from the 90s.
It's a bit of a Tarantino-esque timeline, but yeah.
So
you've hit the 3 decades. Yeah.
So next year it will probably be the 70s. I mean, probably from the 2000s.
I'm surprised you're not going to the 60s. Like that would really mix it up, right?
I guess. Can I confess something? It's probably gonna be surprising to you.
Okay.
I'm so over the 60s.
I think most people are, right? Because our generation is forward thinking. Like we want to go further.
No, we're not. Come on. Nostalgia.
Well, I mean, that's I think politically.
Okay, I'll give you that.
I think politically, I think that's why we're not as impressed by the 60s, especially as we grew up with the generation that defined the 60s, and they've disappointed us so much.
Well, and I think the reason why there's so much obsession with the 70s is because they crammed it down our throats.
That's that too, yeah.
Basically, I mean, what I think I've mentioned on the show before, but the thing that really got me over the 60s is Walk Hard, the Dewey Cox story.
Yeah.
There's a moment where it's the 1960s and everybody's doing drugs and like all these, Dewey Cox is walking around in his mansion and he's like name dropping like every like popular musician of the 1960s. And so they're at his house and he's like, hey, that. And it's this very self-aware knowing moment where his wife and him are both like, it's the 1960s. This is the most important decade that we will ever live in. And there's just this whole like mocking tone. It was like, oh yeah, that's really kind of how it's been, isn't it? That like, everyone treats the 60s as though it was the most important time ever. And it was just another decade.
Right.
So I'm over the 60s and I will probably not pick anything from the 60s.
Well, there you go. There you have
it. Unless it's like, I don't know, like some random like Motown doo-wop thing.
Yeah, that'd be cool. I thought about that last year. Okay. Mm-hmm. Well, Chuck, thank you so much. Matt could not join us, unfortunately, but stick around because Matt does have to announce the next album because he is up next. So I say to Father Chuck, thank you so much for this album. Thank you so much for your insight. It was another successful Music Mayhem for you.
Yes,
I think. And yeah, that's it. Thank you so much for listening. Join us again next week, and good journey.
Good journey.
Many, many minutes later.
Matt, what'd you think about the album?
About Beastie Boys?
Yeah, what'd you think?
About
Just give us your quick thoughts. The headache?
The headache it gave me. I'm sure you guys had this really deep conversation about it, and Chuck got all into what it meant and how it changed things. And I'm so upset that I missed it, not because I give a crap what he said, but because I listened to this for nothing.
Yeah.
Because it's not my thing. I found it unlistenable.
Wow.
It's like panic attack inducing noise. I felt like an old person.
That's an interesting thing to touch on after the conversation we just had about it.
Yeah, I felt like an old person. They're the music that made your parents mad, and now I know why. It's not because your parents had any idea what they were talking about or doing. It's because the noise literally made your parents mad, because the noise makes me angry.
But you still like Intergalactic, right? That's still a cool song to you, right?
Sure. I love hearing the word intergalactic said weirdly 99 million times in a row.
Wow. Oh, wow. You see, this would have been a fun episode, just you and Chuck just going at it over this album.
It would have been very reminiscent of Avatar in music form, because I've had just about as exciting feelings toward this song as I did towards this music as I did for the movie Avatar.
Oh, well, that's funny. I'm sorry you didn't enjoy it and that you didn't even get to talk about it. So you just listened to this album.
I listened to it for nothing. I can appreciate what they were doing. Mm-hmm. I can appreciate that some people like it. It's definitely not my thing.
Not for
you. So on a serious note, I'm not like this is the worst thing I've ever. It's just, to me, it's just noise. It was never my thing, and now it's even less so, because now I'm older and I listen to this and I'm like, no.
All right.
Lots of noise.
Okay, that's.
But yes, but I'm here for something more important.
Yeah,
and that is for sweet, sweet revenge.
Okay,
that's what I'm here for, because unfortunately, Father Chuck, you aren't here for me to watch you have to receive this information live and face to face in person.
Well, no, hold on a second. Don't just choose an album out of spite. You can. That's not music.
It is not out of spite, and you know it. But because
I think I see what's coming. I think I see what's coming.
Because what this was done to me, it is finally time for me to put aside my thoughts of caring about other people's feelings and to do the album I've wanted to do, but have not done it for sake of our fellow co-host.
Say it, Matt. Say it.
We are finally going to be doing NSYNC's No Strings Attached.
Oh.
So. So, and I wish more than anything we could reunite the people from high school and just redo the dance. But anyways, so yeah, Father Chuck, when you hear this, I know you will be filled with joy and excitement, and I'm sure there will be no mean comments to follow on our own Facebook page, because why would you attack us? We are your podcaster. But yes, we will be doing the wonderful 2000 album, the second one by NSYNC, the album that I would argue Beastie Boys have impacted music, but they're gone. NSYNC has impacted music and they are gone, but they changed the tide of music entirely. Mm-hmm. I also, as much as I love them, would blame them partially for the death of rock and roll.
Probably, yeah.
And the birth of what we now have as pop music. And I would especially say that with their celebrity album that followed, but this is their biggest. So this is the one we are going with. Mm-hmm. So we will have plenty to talk about. And I look forward to it. And you know what? You know what? I look forward to listening to this one. I do. This one will not be a headache. This will be me singing very loudly in my house by myself to the music.
I'm excited too. I can't wait. I love this album. I do.
I will be folding laundry and doing dishes for the next week listening to this, and I will love every second of it.
I can't wait to hear what Chuck says about it. Oh, it's gonna be good. It's gonna be really good. All right, so you got it, folks. Go out and listen to No Strings Attached by NSYNC. And join us again next week as we will go into painstaking detail about one of the best NSYNC, one of the best albums of that decade, probably. I would say. This is my
or
opinion.
Ever. Just the music video alone. We'll be talking about that too, my friend, in the dance that changed everything.
Great. All right. Well, so you heard it. Go out, listen to No Strings Attached by NSYNC, and come back next week and we'll talk about it. Matt, thank you so much for your brief insight into Hello Nasty, and also for recommending next week's album.
Absolutely.
Thank you for joining us. Join us again next week. Good journey.
Good journey.